Welcome to the final keynote of TFM&A 2015. I'm Lara Doyle, and on behalf of everybody at TFM&A, we hope you enjoyed the show. At Unilever, the amount of data generated to support product development is massive. Here to talk to us, in a world first exclusive, about how Unilever is putting that data to use, please welcome Kjersten Moody, VP of Information and Analytics.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's a privilege, actually, to be here today amongst colleagues, for we are indeed colleagues in the field of analytics. So before we begin, I'd like to quickly introduce myself, if only to give some context for the remarks that will follow. My name is Kjersten Moody. I am the Vice President for Information and Analytics, and I'm based here in London. Personally, my family and I, we relocated from Chicago to London in June of last year, and it was for the Unilever opportunity, so I joined Unilever as a result of the move. Professionally, there we go, that's much better. Professionally, I've spent essentially my entire career from the technology side, working with data, working with people, and thinking about how to use data to introduce measurable business benefit, efficiencies, and so forth. So it's, data has really been the theme throughout my entire career. So my role at Unilever is really an enterprise role. So we look after the information agenda as well as the analytics agenda for Unilever's functions, markets, and categories globally. We divide this into four basic kind of pillars. The first is our data ecosystem. This is a technical function that manages our various data sources. So we have thousands of data sources that are currently under our management. We think about our information gateway. So this is really how our end users interact with and have access to this data ecosystem. We have an advanced analytics service that is really dedicated to finding value, right? So this is that data science group. And it is underpinned by a global operations team, which is really chartered with making sure that we keep the engine running and that we are delivering on time and in full. So our mandate is really from the operational reporting side of things. So this is people who work in factories and so forth who need to run a report to figure out what they do for the next hour, all the way through to a data science capability, which is where we have mathematicians, statisticians, who are measured on the value that they find, right? And their job really is to ask questions against this data ecosystem that we have managed to create in order to generate competitive advantage or value for Unilever. So just in case nobody knows who Unilever is, I'll just say a few words about that. So we are an FMCG company, fast-moving consumer goods. We operate in 190 countries and territories across the globe. And on any given day, about 2 billion people use one or more of our products. So I think probably everybody in this room, if they were to go home, they would have one or more Unilever products somewhere in their house. So the categories that we operate in are home care, personal care, foods and refreshment. Personally, I was asked this actually in my interview, Ben & Jerry's is my top Unilever product usage. So we always have at least a few tubs of that in the freezer at home. So today what I would like to share actually is not necessarily the secrets of Unilever marketing and technology, because that would be inappropriate. But it's really the key or the most important guiding principles that I have learned over the course of my career as I think about that nexus of people and technology and how it needs to come together to provide business value, business insight, business efficiency. So they guide my team. So as we think about this mandate for Unilever, which is truly an awesome scope, These are the guiding principles that we use to make sure that we are being sort of honest, ethical, at the forefront of leading in the mandate to deliver for Unilever. They're not rocket science. You've probably heard them before. But they are very much the essentials. And with my team, they infuse everything that we do and the decisions that we take. Okay, so the first one, ask the right questions. It may seem blindingly obvious, right? But this is your starting point. And it's actually an incredibly difficult skill to hone when you really step back and intellectually sort of think about what is a good question, an insightful question, versus a blah question, or a question that might lead you down a blind alley. And I guess if you think about it, we've really been teaching ourselves the art of questioning, right, for thousands of years, right? Going back to ancient Greece and the Platonic dialogues and, you know, Socrates sort of annoying people with his questions. It's really been a skill that we have been trying to teach ourselves for thousands of years. And today, in the world of analytics, we're actually at a very interesting, I think, sort of transition point. It's an interesting time to think about data, the uses of data. So taking social media data, for example, and blending it with more traditional trusted data sets, right? What questions are relevant to ask of that new capability? What am I actually going to do with it, right? Does it provide value, or is it just sort of an academic fool's errand? So, and then of course with these large data sets, right, it ends up in a computational world, okay? We're not talking about philosophy anymore, we're talking about computer programming. And how do we translate a business question into something that a computer can help us execute? So it needs to be specific, it needs to be pointed, and it needs to be grounded in the business reality. So at a high level, a question like, how is my brand performing, is completely useless. Like, it doesn't do anything, right? But if you say something that's more tangible and actionable, like, who are my active influencers for my brand in the 18 to 25 range, and are they relevant? Or is my product perceived as overpriced in a particular geography, right? What kind of pricing flexibility do I have? These are the kinds of questions that taking data sources that traditionally haven't been capable of being integrated can really help you answer. And at Unilever, we actually spend a significant amount of time probing, are we asking the right questions? We drag our senior leaders into 2 to 3 day workshops, right, to make sure that we are getting at the core, fundamental nub of the analytics question, and then we start to develop our solution. And it's intellectually extremely taxing. It's a hard thing to do. But, right, the results that we get on the other end of that, whether it's a predictive mobile marketing campaign, or it's a cross-functional market analysis, or it's an upgrade on an S&OP process, right? We've been able to measure, right, that we have been more successful with our business outcome if we actually put people through the rigor of, are we asking the right question? Data quality comes first. Again, really obvious, right? But it's a theme. It's a theme that needs to be in every program. It needs to be in every aspect of how you think about data. So a data set, it needs to be trusted, both in and of itself, as well as it is combined with other data sources, right? So this is an area really to work with your technology partners. Push us in technology to say, what is the data governance? What is the data stewardship? How do you curate this information? Because ultimately, you know, when you take data sets and you put them together into an amalgamated data set, you really need to, if that is to be a trusted advisor into your business decision-making process, then you have to have an understanding of the confidence with which you can use that information. So ask for something simple, like a confidence score that's on every report or every output that you may have. And it's something that's often overlooked, because you can do a really sexy visualization and people tend to take it for granted. It looks good, therefore it must be good, right? And ultimately, data quality, data trustworthiness, if we are to allow information to be leading us in business decisions, needs to be well understood and transparent, okay? So again, an obvious thing, but it's really an everyday theme that we have at Unilever, is to what extent are we confident and comfortable with putting this information either by itself or in combination with other data sets in front of our users and essentially enabling them to use that information for the data or for the decisions that they are going to make. So this is very important, especially in marketing actually, where we're working with social media data sets and we're putting them together with P&L, for example, right? P&L is accurate to the 10th decimal point. You put that next to an analysis coming out of Twitter, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that the end result is accurate to the 10th decimal point. No, right? The confidence level has materially changed based on sort of this new combination of data that we have delivered. I love that picture. Bridge the gap. All right, so I come from technology. I guess that makes me Robert De Niro. It's kind of cool. Anyway, so when we're collaborating on large data sets, as I mentioned earlier, inevitably it ends up, right, in a program, a computer program, right? We're writing an algorithm, we're doing some math, you just need to, right? The volumes are absolutely too vast. So what this really means, and it's been, I think, talked about in cliche terms, but it is actually a very practical consideration, and I think will become increasingly more so, is that the worlds of sort of quote-unquote business and technology are coalescing, right? We are coming together, and we have to understand each other, right? For as much as my colleagues in marketing complain that they don't understand tech talk, I don't really understand marketing talk sometimes. And this is very much, I think, something to be aware of and to get on top of, to get in front of. So the most successful collaborations that I personally have had in my career, that I have seen at Thomson Reuters, where I was, at Unilever, at other companies, have been where it is a cross-functional team, and each member of the team knows something about the other functions, right? So they can empathize, right? They know the language, and they have a certain amount of empathy for the kinds of pressures and questions and sort of compensation measures that the various functions have. So for marketers, I would urge you, get close to your technology teams. I mean, seriously, it may sound sort of trite. Teach them, right? Allow yourself to be taught about their particular subject matter expertise. And as you get into those projects, those programs, those investigations into your data, you will find that the spark of creativity comes earlier and it tends to be bigger when you talk to each other and you understand each other. And I think this is very much a cultural shift, right? It's not training, it's working together. and there's a difference. There really is a difference. So it's something to stay on top of and keep an eye on and to help each other. So for example, at Unilever, we actually spend a lot of time just teaching our end users, right? I have a key pillar in my strategy, which is end user education. I mean, literally, I spend time and money, right, teaching those various functions, markets, category, leaders, directors, operators about not only just what is it that we do, but about the space that we operate in. So when we talk to them, we're getting to those questions faster, right? We're identifying the sort of strategic value in ways that are more efficient and, quite frankly, more insightful. Visualization. Okay. Yes, data speaks. It absolutely does. And it can, and personally I think it should, lead us on a business journey. So it's almost like if a picture is worth 1,000 words, right, a good data visualization is probably worth 10,000 PowerPoints. And it's really, though, you know, this is where those first three guiding principles, I think, start to coalesce. So if you've asked the right question, right, if you really spend some intellectually honest time figuring out your right question, you know the degree to which you can trust your content, and you've got a good cross-functional collaboration, right, then your data visualization will pay off tenfold, because you have a much more meaningful front end to that collaboration between the business and the technology. So for as much time as we spend on question asking, right, we as a technology function spend on thinking about how do we take our output and make it meaningful to our end users. I mean, just simply put, the math itself doesn't stand up. It really doesn't, right? Nobody in marketing gives a crap about SQL statements, okay? I do. I love it. But ultimately, it needs to manifest itself in a visual interface that speaks to the end user, it speaks to the business user, and it takes them on the journey that helps to answer those questions that we identified up front. So it's a core pillar, right? My information gateway. So one of those 4 key tenets that we have for information analytics at Unilever is strictly dedicated to thinking about visualization for the enterprise. Strictly dedicated to that. Okay, empower end users. Again, none of this actually works if our end users are not active participants. Okay, so for the marketing colleagues in the room, this means you. All right. So generating value from data is very much a handshake between the data science and the technology and the business outcome owners. Right. That handshake, it's not a one-off. It's an ongoing. It's an ongoing relationship. Right. We call it conversations. Right? We don't really do analytic projects, we do analytic conversations. Because we're always finding what that next question is, right? We're asking, we're probing, we're challenging. And it requires dedication on both parts. So empowerment, as we define it, is simply put, an end user who has a keen awareness of their business challenge, right? So they can help lead in that question. They understand how, right, to ask a question of data, all right? And who can navigate the tools and, quite frankly, isn't afraid to work with a technology team to reach out for support, to iterate, to take some risks, and who will challenge, right? It's not an easy thing, but it is ultimately well, it's a critical thing, quite frankly. So we are actively investing in what we call the culture of analytics, right? So it's how are we empowering those end users? It's the training that I mentioned, right? It's the tools, it's the visualization, but it's also demonstrating that success resume, right, through the use of data in driving those business decisions. It is really about establishing that conversation and having that conversation become an organic part of the business day, right? So we are embedded into the thinking process for those functions, markets, and categories at Unilever. So these are skills we develop. These aren't one-off things, right? So the technology choices that we make the investments that we make, the strategic direction that we set, now and over time, we keep these 5 things in mind. And we use them to check ourselves, right? As to if what we're doing is worth doing it. So there you go. It wasn't really secret sauce, but these are absolutely the guiding principles that have worked, quite frankly, over the years for me in my career, and that we are actively employing at Unilever as we think about the various types of analytics, sort of data-driven work that we're up to. So it's a very exciting time, actually, and this is a great event, right? I'm really happy to be here. I was walking around the booths. There are a lot of fantastic kind of things to think about out there, actually. I mean, it's really wonderful. And I hope that you'll keep these 5 things in mind to challenge the vendors who are trying to sell you something, all right? What does this do for my end user, right? Yeah, that's a really great visual interface, but you know what? The data quality that it takes to populate that tool sucks, right? So what are you really trying to sell me here? And have that conversation, right? And challenge yourself, challenge your peers, right? Infuse the core concepts into how you think about using data in your day-to-day business life. And I think you'll really start to see an elevation of the outcome. I certainly have over my career. We certainly have at Unilever. And it's something that we continue to think pretty critically and deeply about. So I've just had the 5-minute warning sign, which was lovely. So I guess I'll open it up now for questions, if there are any.
I got curious on one of the last bits you were mentioning there. So out of a data collection and data quality perspective, which of the vendors downstairs are the best ones, according to you?
You know, we've got thousands of data sources, so that's actually an impossible question to answer because I hold financial information, government information to one standard versus Twitter information to another standard. So it's really in how you define your governing principles through data stewardship, and then you evaluate those types of data against the standards for the category that they're in. So, you know, from a data source, data collection standpoint, I mean, for a company like Unilever, we literally have thousands of data sources, so it's very hard to answer. We use tools. I mean, I'm not here to sell a tool, but we do use tools like Tableau, where we can actually very quickly visualize the data and you can kind of see. We have data quality checks that are part of our master data management program. So there are a number of different, let's call it, hurdles that a data set needs to go through in order for us to make an evaluation for the data quality to give it the confidence score.
Hi, Kjersten.
Hi.
I hear a lot about chief data officer roles. They start to seem to be springing up all over the place. Is that how you would define your role? Maybe not at least in title, but in the type of work that you do.
Am I getting promoted? That's pretty cool.
So does such a role exist in Unilever? And also, are you finding out that peers in similar companies to Unilever are employing such a role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I report into our Chief Enterprise and Technology Officer. I am a peer of our global CIO. So I'm at that level on the org chart. We do not have a Chief Data Officer. So I suppose the job description, and I want to be careful here as there's evidence being created, that the job description of a Chief Data Officer would more or less fit with what I do. I'm accountable for information analytics at Unilever, sort of full stop. And if that's a Chief Data Officer job description, then so be it. I'll take that up with my boss next week. So we have time for one more question. The gentleman in the way back there.
Hi.
And then I can take informal questions after.
Okay.
So.
For people who don't work for companies as big as Unilever, who maybe don't have thousands and thousands of data sources on which to ask these questions, what approach do you suggest to them?
So I think it depends on what your questions are, right? If they are fairly discrete types of questions, I would honestly suggest doing it yourself, right? Nobody knows your own company better than you. And nobody is more invested in your own outcome than you are, right? So if you have mathematical expertise, if you have technology partnership, and if you have business wherewithal, you can do a lot with a SQL statement and Excel, right? The scale of Unilever is such that that doesn't really work for us. We do use it for small conversations with our business. But when we think about the mandate at scale, right, SQL statements in Excel doesn't quite cut it for us. So I would actually suggest doing it internally. And if you have trusted partners, people are usually willing to sell you services. So, yeah. Okay, I just got the wrap-up sign, so I think that means I need to wrap it up. So I'll again just say thank you very much. It's been my privilege to be here. I'll just be outside if anybody would like to chat. And again, please, I encourage you, enjoy the event. It's a privilege to be here, right, with this amalgamation of talent. And I hope that what we've talked about will help you make better use of, quite frankly, what we have on the other side of the curtain. So thanks very much.